Okay, we are live now today. I am excited because I have a brand new setup. Uh, After weeks of internet issues, I have a new computer. I have a wired connection. I have a new modem. I mean, just figured let's not take an incremental approach. Let's just change it all out. So I hope things work very well with this new setup and system that we have. Um, I'm looking at something that looks funny, but that's on my software. So I hope we're good. Uh, let's begin. I want to let everybody know that, first of all, my book that I finally uploaded to Kindle is, or it was temporarily, the number one new release in the self-help section. So that was pretty cool. I encourage everyone to purchase this book. It's $7. Now, let's talk about this for a minute. First of all, I changed the name. I had been offering it to my clients as, what was I calling it? Keeping It Off, I think. And the book that's now on Amazon Kindle is entitled Thin Forever, The Principles of Keeping the Weight Off. So this is not a scientific tome. This is a book about principles, about mechanics, about the things that you need to do, you need to know, and that you are in control of. So super important. You can get it on Amazon Kindle. It is linked somewhere on my Facebook page. I will link it also here on this stream in the show notes or somewhere. I will do my best to do it. If not, you can look it up by my name, Dr. David Rendelstein, Thin Forever, The Principles of Keeping the Weight Off. And I got to tell you something. I sent out emails. I sent out some texts. It's $7. If you're not willing to, everyone wants to lose the weight and everyone wants to keep it off. Nobody comes to me and says, listen, please help me lose weight temporarily. All right. That's what I want. If I could look good for 2 months, then I'm happy, gaining it all back and then some. I have never heard that. I do not think I will ever hear that. I pray to God I will never hear that. Yet does that happen? Of course, all the time. So everyone wants to lose the weight off, and then this odd thing happens. There's resistance to purchasing and reading a book that costs all of $7, and it's all of 38 pages. It doesn't make sense. Losing weight costs much more in money and in other resources. So I can only encourage you, please buy the book. Please read the book. The best thing to do is you download it right away. You don't wait. You don't have an intention of downloading it. You don't have an intention of reading it. You download it and you read it, at least part of it, right away. If I had $1 for every internet product that I have downloaded and then never used again, be it a course, a book, what have you, I'd have a lot more dollars than I do now. So again, I encourage you. You're always welcome. If you want to discuss the book, contact me. We can certainly do that. All right. Now, interestingly enough, although, like I said, it's not a technical volume, it's not a scientific book, it's not a how-to. It's the things that you have to understand as an individual. But let's talk a little bit about the science of obesity, because this is an interesting story, really. It's not all that we've been led to believe. Let's put it that way. All right. When we're talking about the science of weight loss, when we're talking about obesity, we are talking about ultimately metabolism. Now, there is a lot that goes into the metabolism. These are complex mechanisms. Metabolism is the sum total of all of the chemical processes that take place in the body, and it has everything to do with energy. Ultimately, our bodies are about creating energy and sustaining life. I mean, it's that simple. We don't have to go that much further. They also carry around us, but now I'm delving in potentially to the spiritual, right? In order to be healthy, in order to feel good, in order to experience joy, In order to be lean, we need to have well-functioning metabolisms. And as I said, that is pretty complex. But let's see if we could break it down a little bit, because there are two master control hormones or systems. There are others that contribute to it, but there are two that researchers are discovering are more important. And they can be considered metabolic pathways, right? There is one called mTOR, M-T-O-R, and that stands for something that we're not getting into. And the other is called leptin. And these are fascinating little devices, okay, because they each have a role to play in our body. mTOR's role, when it is turned on, mTOR helps with growth. Leptin helps with repair. And so now we introduce the concept of cycles, right? When mTOR is up, it's about growth, and when mTOR is up, leptin is down. And when leptin is up and mTOR is down, now we have repair. And ideally, in a body, both of those things are going to be happening simultaneously. Or, I'm sorry, not simultaneously, I apologize. They're going to be happening in the cycles, one after the other, at least consistently. Let's put it that way. That's a much better way to think of it. So the questions are, what do they each do? How do we turn them on? When do we want to turn them on and turn them off? So mTOR will help you grow muscle. That is the good news. It is turned on when you eat protein, a lot of protein, when you eat carbohydrates, when your insulin is spiked, when you're stressed. Okay, so exercise is a stressor, so that will turn it on also. So this is like, let's think of a company, right? Let's think of the factory. This is the factory that involves growth and building. The good news is that it will contribute to growth and building. The bad news is that when it's turned on too much, it's also contributing to things like inflammation. And we got to talk about inflammation, because when this inflammation is turned on, other things become affected and become turned off. And when we talk about inflammation, we're not talking about on an acute basis. That's good. That's part of the healing process. We're talking about chronic inflammation. We all hear about this. You know, we all hear about a lot of things that are ill-defined, and we don't know how to use them, and we don't know exactly what they mean, but we know they're good or they're bad, and it's generally not that simple. Again, acute inflammation is good, right? Because it brings chemicals to an area that needs to be repaired. Chronic inflammation is bad because even though it's there to repair, it's going to cause some destruction. It's going to cause some interference. So what happens is this. Well, let's talk about leptin, and then we could kind of put it together. Leptin is a little bit different. It's not a factory. It's not involved in growth. It's involved in repair. It's involved in healing and breaking things down. So when we think about leptin, it is kind of the master metabolic control hormone. And what it is it's produced in the fat. It has everything to do with energy. So basically, when you have fat on your stomach and you have a sufficient amount, the leptin will be released and it will travel up to the brain and it will say to the brain, hey, we're good. Now the brain says, okay, good, we're not hungry, right? We don't need more energy. We have a sufficient amount. And this is a regulation system. This is a good system, okay? There are buts. Now, the benefits of leptin are things like when it is up, so fat is being burned. Repair is happening. There's a process that's involved with the cells. It's called autophagy. Auto meaning self and phagy meaning eating. So this is where the cells are eating the bad parts of the cells, the damaged parts. Okay, so this is very good. This is the state that we get people into on our program. Well, at least in the first part of our program, okay? because Ecclesiastes was right. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. And I know what some of you are saying. You're saying that was the Byrds. I know the song by heart. I listen to it all the time. Yes, it was the Byrds also. I don't think that they ever really credit Ecclesiastes enough. Personal opinion. But getting back to leptin, I lost my train. It's a good thing there's another one coming every few minutes. So getting back to it, again, it involves cleaning, healing, breaking things down, right? You really can't build muscle when your leptin is high, but you can burn fat. You will burn fat. So we like that phase. We like when that happens. That is a wonderful thing. It should not be the end of the story because the growth cycle is needed also. And when I speak now, I'm speaking about in general in life. I'm not speaking specifically about our program, even though our program takes advantage of these understandings, right? We understand. We want to get people into that state where the leptin is not resistant. Because what happens is this. When that other regulator, mTOR, is turned on by high stress and high protein and high carbs and insulin spikes, then the leptin goes down, then our ability to burn fat goes down. If it happens chronically, then it will cause inflammation chronically. That inflammation itself will interfere with the leptin signaling to the brain. So now we don't know that we should not eat. That message that says you're not hungry anymore, you don't need any more energy, you don't need more calories, that is not heard. It's a message that is not heard, much like myself sometimes when I speak on Facebook. Okay, and we call that leptin resistance. The signals are being sent, but they're blocked. All right, so we don't want to be in a leptin-resistant state. A chronic leptin-resistant state, you may be aware of this. You'll find that you're hungry at night. You'll find that your energy is very low. You'll find that it's hard to lose fat, and it accumulates around the belly. And the thing about these regulatory mechanisms in the body is that if they are turned off, then we get these vicious cycles. Okay? So, a long time of chronic inflammation and high mTOR and leptin resistance, and what happens is you create more fat, which creates higher mTOR, more leptin resistance. It creates cortisol and hormones that are about dealing with stress, and cortisol itself creates more fat, especially around the belly area, especially that internal kind of fat called visceral fat, which in and of itself creates inflammation. So do you see how this works? I mean, it becomes self-reinforcing when it's not supposed to be, when it's supposed to be regulating. It's supposed to keep us within these relatively narrow physiological limits. That's how we are designed. We have these feedback mechanisms that keep us within these better kind of ranges. So we see that when we're talking about obesity, when you start to gain weight, when you are in that obese state, what that is, that's a state of imbalance, right? Those regulatory systems are not balanced anymore. The hormones are not balanced. And it's also a state of chronic inflammation. And that's ultimately what researchers are saying obesity is in this day and age. It's obviously a metabolic issue, right? But it's at its foundational level, the bottom line is it is an imbalance, and it caused by inflammation, or at least involves inflammation. Okay? So that's what we want to prevent. So how do we take advantage of this knowledge? As I said before, we have this concept of cycles, and that's how things work in nature. So with mTOR and leptin, while you're living your life, and let me just digress for a moment and let me say this. Obviously, a lot of people come to me to take advantage of our ability to help them lose weight. Fewer come to help with weight maintenance, and that's why I wrote the book, because I've seen this up and down thing a lot, right? I offer a year-long maintenance program. It is very simple conceptually, because I discovered that it has to be. Why? Because people can do strict for a very short time, right? People can do strict structure for a short time. In my experience, you ask people to be strictly structured over a year, and it's not a possibility. So I got to the point where when we were offering that other maintenance program, which is based around the things that we're talking about, it was very well put together. It was difficult for people. And I got to the point where I couldn't sell it anymore because I didn't think that it was going to be great. I didn't think that it would be executed properly. So I stopped offering it and I created something else. Okay? But that program was wonderful. For the people who did it, it was wonderful. I have this one testimonial from this lady who had a lung disease and it kind of went into remission. So it was really, really awesome, but again, difficult to execute over a long term. Now, here's how it was structured. It was structured in cycling this mTOR with leptin. So you had days that were considered rest and repair days, right? That's when the leptin is functioning properly, right? Leptin sensitivity, we call it. And then you had these other days which were building, like growth days. You want to exercise on those days. Those days you want to eat more. You want more protein on those days. You want higher carbs on those days. Your carbs should never be really processed carbs in an ideal world, but they should be, the healthier kind of starches, potatoes or potentially rice. It depends on you. People have different kind of thresholds for and levels of resistance to this kind of carbs, to these kind of starchy carbs. So if you know what it is, you should eat them on those days, on the days of growth. And they should be eaten after you work out. These are your exercise days also, right? And you should have about 3 to 4 of these days a week. Days where you're concentrating on building. You're exercising, you're building muscle growth. You don't care if your insulin is up a touch. Then you should have a few days a week that are about repair. On those days, you want to have fewer proteins. You don't want any carbs, except, green leafy vegetables. And you don't want to exercise on those days because it's rest and repair. Now, if you do this and you do some other things, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but you can restore the balances and you can arrest that inflammation. And this is how presumably we were at one point. I mean, without doing it consciously, but our bodies were in a better state and things were much easier. Okay? So I want to talk about some other factors. Let's call them confounding factors, things that can get in the way. Sometimes a person will have a pathology, and autoimmune is big these days. Autoimmune is also an inflammatory kind of condition, and it creates inflammation, right? Autoimmune is where the system is functioning such that the body's attacking itself. There are several different kinds. It affects different areas. Often when one person has one, they have more than one. So for some people, they might have thyroid, but then they also might have Crohn's or something else, right? So autoimmune is a complicating factor, and you need to, if you want to understand this cycling program, you have to consider autoimmune as well, because when we're talking about the days when we're kind of repairing, we don't want to eat as much or as often, right? We don't want to snack. We want to take advantage of those fasting periods. And this is intermittent fasting. And this is why, people talk about intermittent fasting. Well, why does it work? And this is why it works, because it helps with leptin sensitivity. It's one of the reasons it works. I mean, it has advantages for other hormones, for example, HGH, human growth hormone. But this is a big reason why it works. If you have an autoimmune condition, however, you don't want to fast as long as you would otherwise. So that has to be taken into account. So there's a lot that needs to be considered. We tend to view things in a very black and white way, but everything is kind of conditional when we're talking about in the body. Because even though lower protein is better for the leptin, it's not necessarily better for autoimmune conditions, right? And if you have autoimmune conditions, you might want to be doing things like, proteins and stews and salt and bone broth, things like that, collagen. Okay, so there are some things to consider, but I want you, even though I tend to digress, I want you to understand these things conceptually. And conceptually, the bottom line is this, is that our body has mechanisms to keep us within narrow physiological limits, relatively narrow physiological limits, right? And it has these feedback mechanisms where if something gets too high, it brings it lower. Something gets too low, it brings it higher. That is also the case when it comes to weight. However, these things can easily get out of whack, get out of balance. And our task is to restore those balances. And if we do that, then things are going to be much better. Now, I'm going to delve into something else in a moment that has to do with those balances and inflammation. But again, I want you to get it conceptually. Given that these things work the way they do, a good strategy is to cycle these different plans, these different regulatory mechanisms, and to utilize this understanding. A couple of other things that work very well. One is cold plunges. There's a reason people are doing cold plunges. You see, it all has to do, again, with this understanding. So the cold is very good for kind of resetting the leptin. Okay? Now, for people who are in a high-stress state, it can be shocking to the system and can cause the release of adrenaline. And so you may not want to do cold plunges like that. You may just want to do, put some cold water on your face every few hours. That might work better for you. The other thing is this, is that when we're talking about hormones, we're talking about a system in our bodies that has evolved over a very, very long time. It involves cues. What do I mean by cues? There are signals that tell us when certain hormones go into effect or should. And what dictates that? Well, it's the daily cycle. Right? So it's the cycle it largely has to do with light. So we kind of want to regulate light. Now, this is a whole story in and of itself. There are people who are preaching this. And it makes a lot of sense when you understand it, because otherwise you might be like, well, what the hell does blue light have to do with anything? Why do I need to shut my computer off at night and not look at my phone and whatever? But when you understand how we've developed and how powerful these signals are, when we get that first light in the morning, believe it or not, that helps us go to sleep at night because it signals the production of a certain chemical, melatonin, that helps us go to sleep at night. And most people have no idea about that. And most people have no idea the degree to which kind of light is. We're getting these horrible signals all the time. It's like living in Times Square. You don't know when day is and when night is. And we have made our lives using artificial light. And everywhere we are, there's artificial light. So a very good thing that you can do is in the morning, get out and get some first light for 30 minutes. If you can watch the sunrise, that is wonderful. Don't do it through your window. You won't have the same effects. But if you can get outside and you can get that first light, and you can get outside a few times during the day, that will help reset some of your hormones. That will help restore some measure of normalcy. So I wanted to mention that. Now, lastly, something else that relates to all of this stuff, and I know this is a lot, and this is nothing. It gets much deeper than this, but we've been talking about what's going on a macro level with our government and how that relates to food and how that relates to health and regulation and all of this stuff. So I said that obesity is a chronic inflammatory state where the metabolism is out, and it's a evidence and a symptom of imbalance in the body, right? Now, we are also getting imbalanced and inflamed by the chemicals that are in our environment. And now we have a Secretary of Health and Human Services who is very concerned about that. He's been fighting for this for a long time. And just this week, he had a meeting with some of the big muckety mucks in big food. Okay, so we're talking about like the presidents of PepsiCo and Nabisco and who knows? I don't even know who the big food companies are anymore, right? M&M Mars, presumably. But he had a meeting with them, and the crux of the meeting was, you guys need to regulate yourselves. Because if you don't, we're going to do it for you. You've been experimenting on our citizens for a very long time. And I would say that is factually the case. And specifically, they talked about dyes. They talked about food dyes. Food dyes are a big problem. They put them into our foods because it kind of makes them look prettier and, makes kids want them. You have to understand the thinking. And I'm not saying necessarily that these people are evil, although that has been said. And by these people, I mean, food executives. But they are fantastic salespeople. It is a huge industry. And so when they create a product, they don't just create a product thinking about the nutritional value. In fact, the nutritional value is often last on their mind. They think about how to sell it. And when they think about how to sell it, they think about it in a holistic way. They look at all of the factors that would sell the food, including appearance. And that's where dyes come into play. They're cheap, and they improve the appearance. All right? They think about everything. They think about mouthfeel. They think about, the crunchiness. They think about something called melting point. How long will it take the food to melt in your mouth? Because the faster it does, the quicker you will be grabbing more. They think about things we will never think about. I mean, these people are brilliant, but ultimately it has an effect on human health in this country and on the health of this nation, the least healthy developed nation in the world. So RFK Jr. had this meeting with them, and, from all reports, they were amenable to it, to the regulation. They wanted to work with the government. Smart approach to not just come out and be resistant, regardless of what their plans are. Right? I don't know what their plans are. They might argue that some of the regulations are going to hurt them financially, going to hurt consumers because prices are going to raise. The dyes, as far as the dyes, there are natural things that can dye food, that can change the color of food. Things like turmeric, for example. And that would be wonderful. That has anti-inflammatory capabilities. The dyes that they use have pro-inflammatory. They're pro-inflammatory. And we've already talked about that. And we talked about just one of the side effects of that i.e. obesity, but there are a bunch of others, heart disease, cancer, etc. So, and some of these dyes have been shown to cause cancer. So Junior was like, okay, we want to get rid of these things. And we'll see how that plays out. I intend to keep up with it, to keep you informed. There's some other things that have gone on, with RFK Jr. since he's gotten into office. We'll talk about those later. I think this is where his passion is. His passion is in getting the chemicals out of our food and out of our environment. He's also looking at other things. He's looking at transparency. He's looking at vaccines and whether they've been studied sufficiently. That's a thing that has been brought up. So we'll talk more about that in the future. But I hope everyone got a lot out of this today. Okay. Number one, buy the book. All right. I will try to link to it. I say try because I'm not sure if I have the technical expertise. I think I do, though. All right. Number two, understand that we have these regulatory systems in our body. When they are out of whack, there are going to be consequences, and understand that there are things to be done about them that can get them back into whack. Okay. We didn't talk about sleep much. Sleep, very good for leptin. Okay. And I think that's it. Number one and number two. If you got that, you're good. All right, everyone. Have a great week. Take care.